Coming up on ParaTruth Reborn, we'll be talking to Dee Norman about her book, The Seeker's Guide to Grimoire Magic.
Welcome to ParaTruth.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of ParaTruth Reborn. We are live on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast, and of course, the United Public Radio Network. My name is Erik.
And I'm Justin.
And tonight we are talking with Dee Norman about grimoires, old magical texts, and making ancient magical practices for modern seekers. Dee, welcome to ParaTruth Reborn.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. Before we get into grimoire, I know that's the big topic here, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you first became interested in magic and spiritual practice?
Yeah, sure. I was kind of born into it. I grew up in an Italian-American family. My grandmother came from southern Italy, or her family did, and I grew up with my mother and grandmother teaching me a variety of techniques they wouldn't call it magic, but it's magic. It's just the stuff we did to run our household, to protect the people that you love, to cure people of the evil eye, stuff like that. And I also grew up in a house that was haunted, and I loved books, and that drove me to the library to find out more, to try to figure out what was going on in my house. And of course, right adjacent to the paranormal section is the occult esoteric section, and that started to broaden my horizons outside of my family's practices. And then eventually I found reference to tarot cards and asked for some. I got some for St. Nicholas night, and the rest is history. That just blew the gates wide open and introduced me to all kinds of magical concepts.
Now, growing up in an Italian-American family, did that shape the way that you understood magic today? Or was it, like you said, they didn't talk about it in that sense?
They really didn't talk about it in that sense when I was younger. And then as I got older in my 30s and started really questioning and comparing the things that I found in other materials or practices from other people that I knew, and started sharing that with my mother and grandmother, they'd still say, well, magic is what you do. But then they would start incorporating things that I discovered in their practices. And I got to watch some of that osmosis and change happen in their own personal practices based on what popular culture was doing, what neo-paganism was doing. And so that was a really interesting experience for me. But magic was always that other thing that I did. That the family stuff was not magic.
Okay.
And I remember our grandfather's side is Sicilian, and growing up, he'd always, he's making dinner, he'd always throw salt over his shoulder or do little things that at the time I didn't think anything of it, but his mom sure did it, and it kind of grew with him. But it's always been interesting that those of us in the European side over there, there is kind of, for a lot of people, some sort of magical reference within their families, whether they know it or not.
Right. It passes by people because it's not called out as magic. And I spent years questioning what my family did, and did that count? Did I count as being raised in a magical tradition if it was not called magic? And I think that's what spurred me to write my first book, which was about Italian-American magic, so that people could see it in print and know that this is a legitimate spiritual magical practice, even if it's not called that thing.
Right.
Well, now, you've been studying cartomancy for quite a while and working professional as a card reader since, is it 95, I believe?
Yes.
How did your work with cards eventually connect to your study of grimoire?
So It's all of a piece. Basically, when you study tarot, that leads you to different magical organizations like the Golden Dawn. The Golden Dawn is heavily influenced by the Sacred Book of Abramelin, which is a famous grimoire, for example. MacGregor Mathers, who was part of the Golden Dawn, translated the Key of Solomon. And so it's hard not to, if you're interested in those types of magical organizations, loop around to the other things that they were interested in that maybe wasn't part necessarily 100% of the curriculum, or was only a small piece of the curriculum of that organization, but it was just too intriguing to pass up. So my first contact with the idea of grimoires really came from a fascination with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
Now you bring up a very good point, like one particular thing.
Nope. Justin, you went out. Nope. So pretty quiet. No. No, it's very rare that we have tech issues, but occasionally I try that.
How about now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I got a screw thing going on here. There we go. Okay. So it's interesting that you bring up that one thing led you into another thing in this particular field of study, because I think that's, no matter where we go or what we do in the paranormal, it just keeps leading us to more and more. And has that kind of been the mindset for you, that you always will dig deeper?
Yes. I tell people two things. One, I tell them I'm a perpetual student. I am constantly learning and I'm constantly exploring. And the other thing I tell them is that if you want a lifelong hobby, get involved even in just a small fraction of the esoteric or the paranormal, because that will feed you for the rest of your life intellectually, because there's so much, it just never ends. And it does tend to branch out and connect to so many different topics, and find yourself studying the oddest things sometimes in order to carry that back to your original topic of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really interesting how just the paranormal, the metaphysical, the occult, how they do intertwine, and the amount of information not only has pre-existed us, but continues to grow on topics that Justin and I have studied for 20 years now. We'll come across an article or a book, and it's like, oh, I've never heard about this. This is new, and it's like it gives you a whole new spin on things, and it kind of pulls you back to early in your quote unquote, we'll call it career or your practice or whatever it is. It's like, man, now I can take this and use it or apply it in a way that works today, and especially with some of this grimoire stuff and magical practices, like some of it is outdated for modern people who are very techy and like to use magic via tech and are trying to learn that type of thing. They're like, well, wait, I gotta light candles, I gotta do this, I gotta do it. It's like, oh yeah, there's physical elements, that come to be with this. So it's always interesting, I think.
Absolutely.
Now, regarding grimoire, for listeners who have heard the word but maybe don't fully understand it, what exactly is a grimoire?
It's an easy word to misunderstand, because like a lot of things with the paranormal and with the occult world, there's multiple definitions, and it all depends on who you're speaking with. So in a general sense, the term grimoire can simply mean a book that has anything to do with magic. So that could be any book that has anything to do with the topic of magic. But in a stricter sense, a more narrow sense, Grimoire is a book on magic that teaches you a system of operations that allow you eventually to get in contact with non-physical entities, whether those be planetary spirits, whether those be angels, demons, what have you. You're using a system of rituals to prepare yourself psychologically, physically, and purify yourself so that you can therefore command these external spirits. Some people think they're external, some people think they're features of your internal psychological landscape. That's a whole other debate. But it's written as though they are external forces.
Well, and I think a lot of our ideas on the paranormal, supernatural come from pop culture. Like we think of like Hocus Pocus, where they had the grimoire made out of human skin and the eyeball moving around. And as much as I would love to think that that's what a grimoire was, I don't think I've come across one that is like that. Now we're gonna start to kind of get into the book here because that's the whole reason you're here. What made you want to write this book about ancient grimoires?
Well, it began when I was young. They fascinated me early, and but back in ye olden times, well, prior to the internet, it was hard to get a hold of the actual text. You could find plenty of books that talked about the text, but like if you're an 11-year-old kid growing up in Kentucky, it's kind of hard to get a copy even of the Key of Solomon, which you can go and order online today and have it shipped to your house. So it
Erik
started
has the lesser key.
so it starts with this early fascination, and then as I got older and had access, basically through a lot of online digital sources, scans of manuscripts or translations that were up on websites on the earlier internet, I really got fascinated with it. But I was often discouraged from pursuing it as a style of magic to practically work myself for a variety of reasons. Some people who are practicing were like, "Oh, that's too Christian. Leave it alone." Other people like, "That's too evil. Leave it alone." I'm like, "Well, that's the dichotomy, is what that is. Like, we got to make up our minds here." And then also getting a message in a lot of cases like you're not the type of person to do that kind of magic. And so once I finally got over that barrier, which took quite a long time to do so, it was a book that I wanted to write to kind of throw the gates open for people who maybe didn't grow up in libraries like I did, who maybe weren't obsessed with books like I was, but who were curious about these older sources of knowledge and how they can interact with them, even if they might be in a different language, or even if the information might be encoded in some way. I wanted to kind of invite people in. It's always great to have someone at the doorway beckoning you into a topic.
Right.
And I wanted to say, here's this amazing source of knowledge and exploration and enlightenment. Why don't you come in and check them out, even if, you don't feel like you're the right person to do it.
One thing a lot of people don't understand it nowadays, especially the younger generations, what it was like to go to a library and actually look for this kind of stuff. I remember when I was growing up, I was always looking at X-Files magazines because I was in my family and I would always watch the X-Files. So that was my first introduction really to the paranormal, aside from my own haunted house. And when I wanted information, wanted to learn anything about the stuff that they were showing on X-Files at the library, asking the person at the front desk or looking through the computer, like, is this in stock? I was like, it's so easy nowadays to go online. It's like, man, those are the kind of the days I kind of miss the library. I know, like, they still exist, but it's hard to go. It's the mentality is like, man, it's just right here at my fingertips. Though, why go to a library?
But then you get those that are still absolutely dedicated to the library, because I know a lot of people here go to our local library a lot.
Well, and one thing about you kind of mentioned regarding Grimoire Magic and just magic in general. Some saying it's too Christian, others saying it's too evil. It's like the one thing that I noticed, over my studies is that typically when it comes to magic, it's something that you make your own. There is no right or wrong. There is no too Christian or too evil. There's, it's just is what your personality is, and it works with you, and you work it and adapt it to your own setting. Which is all, I always find very intriguing because one person's, let's say a hedge witch, one hedge witch is very different from another based on the practices that they're doing and the type of materials they're using and things like that, and it kind of becomes this big melting pot of individuals. And it's like you learn so much when you read other people's grimoires. For those who put them out, there's a few people who've authored grimoires and have published them so that you can have kind of a guide to your own magical practices. And a lot of them have notes, and they're just like, just make it your own. Follow this ingredient list, but turn it into your own thing. And I think that's something that gets confusing for people because I think a lot of people nowadays want like a straightforward, like, how do I do this? And it's like, it's not always that simple.
Well, people often they question authenticity and if they're doing it right,
Right.
and is this the authentic way to do this or that? And I just tell them, I just ask, is it working? Are you happy? Is your mind at peace? Are you getting what you want out of your magical and spiritual work? Then that's authentic enough for me. You don't have to go any further than that.
Right.
Now, I, I've thought about grimoires a lot. Obviously, being doing this for as long as I have, why do you think grimoires have felt inaccessible to the everyday seeker today?
I think today in particular, part of the problem is I call it the TBR mentality. And trust me, I have my to be read list, and I think that we are accustomed to bite size, easily digestible information. And if we confront a text that is dense or difficult or takes extreme effort to get through, our first impulse is to turn away from it or to go, oh, maybe this is not for me, because I can't blaze through it at the speed of light. And instead, I'd like to encourage people to look at it as this kind of learning process. You're learning the book, you're learning the structure of the book, you're learning how the information is presented, and you're teaching yourself how to be a consumer of that denser information. And when you start a new grimoire, it's always a challenge to first establish yourself and kind of get your footing. But I think that in our modern, we're very used to the convenient delivery of knowledge and information. And I like to help people see the value of discovery and research and sitting with knowledge and ideas, because then I think the reading of a grimoire becomes like an initiatory process instead of just a seeking knowledge.
Hmm. One thing that I've myself included at one point, but a lot of individuals that I've encountered who are new to magical practices or the occult, one thing that they tend to do when they're looking at books is they judge a book by its cover. And sometimes, depending on their background, they'll look at it and be like, oh, this is scary, right? There's a pentagram on it. That's devil. It's like, well, no. That's, obviously, like, they don't know. They learn these things based on pop culture, which turned, the pentagram into something that was satanic versus something that was magical.
Mm.
Even the Christians used the pentagram at one point to represent the five wounds of Christ. And there's like a certain historical context behind these symbols that people don't realize, and they become scared and standoffish and like, I shouldn't open that. It's dark. It might invite something. So with that said, has part of your goal in writing this book and sharing these things been like the goal to remove the fear factor around grimoires and around magic in general?
Definitely. My favorite thing to do is to introduce people who aren't familiar with working magic. But the thing is that there are barriers to that process. So my book is Seeker's Guide to Grimoire Magic. It comes out, it's published by Llewellyn. That means in a bookstore or a library, it's going in a particular section, and it's going into the metaphysical, spirituality, magical section. So it used to be called the occult section. They've softened that terminology in a lot of bookstores recently. And that itself, just being in that section, that's a barrier. There's some people that will never walk into that section willingly, just like there are some people that will never pick up a book with a pentagram on the front. And, I think that what happens to people is a fascination, even if they feel like maybe it's not quite right or maybe it's a little bit daring. What happens is a fascination, and they can't get an image or a concept or a book out of their head. And then they progress and they dig a little bit more, and then they read a little bit more, and then they dig a little bit more. So, I think people come to these concepts in different ways, but that, it is really hard sometimes to engage with people who are completely, have never had contact with any magical practice before, because there are those barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just talking to you and even looking through the book and reading through the book, it's very obvious that you have a kind of a sense of humor and also a sense of practicality when it comes to your work and to this book as well. Um, why is that important to you? I mean, it's important to us too for the show because we joke all the time because we feel it shouldn't be taken like so seriously. But what, from your perspective, what is it?
I don't know what I would be without my sense of humor. It's the thing
That's fair.
it's the thing that keeps me going. It's the thing that keeps my ego in check. It's the thing that helps me connect with people. And you have to, I think, engaging in magical practices in a lot of cases, you have to be able to have a humorous view of yourself. Anybody who's going to get dressed up in a robe and cast a circle with a sword and light a bunch of candles and chant funny words out loud with all of the heart and gusto that they can put into it, like, you can't take yourself too seriously, because literally that way lies madness. Like, you have to do it, I think, with a sense of humor. And with an eye to the practical too, because a lot of what we read in older texts, especially, and in that we see sometimes in social media with these very, very complex setups that people do, and they're so aesthetically pleasing and they're so beautiful, and that causes a lot of people to go, well, then I guess magic's not for me, because there's no way that I'm going to have an altar set up like that, and there's no way that I'm going to be doing all these complex things. And I can hear my grandma in the back of my head going, yeah, you don't need that. You can do, like, who needs that? We've got salt, we've got olive oil, we've got a white candle. Let's do something. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. So let's say someone gets to the end of this book. They finish the book completely. What do you hope a reader feels after completing your book?
Like all my books, what I hope they feel is empowered.
Mm-hmm.
What I hope they feel is that they can take the knowledge that is in the book that works for them and do things with it. That's really vague, right?
That's fair.
But seriously, to whatever they wish to do they want to delve further into grimoire magic armed with these basics that are in my book? Awesome. Do they just want to use what they've learned to inform the practices that they're already doing? Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Do they want to use it as inspiration to write a novel? Amazing. Like, whatever the desire is, I hope that whoever shuts the cover on the book at the end feels empowered to do something new,
Right.
whatever's next.
Now, we talked about this earlier about how people get their ideas about the word grimoire being kind of from a Hollywood style occultism. It's a forbidden book. It's dangerous. What do people usually get wrong when it comes to grimoires?
I think what they get wrong is that they're too hard. That there's too many barriers between the knowledge in the book and themselves, and that they're therefore incapable of engaging with them in a meaningful way. I think that's the thing, because of course the pop culture and it has built this idea of these very, very formidable books. I mean, have you seen The Ninth Gate? Like, that unleash all of this, power, and that you have to be very, very skilled and knowledgeable before you even approach them. And my answer to that is that, everything's a little bit risky. Magic itself is a little bit risky. Esoteric practices are risky, and you have to be a little bit daring. And you don't have to necessarily pass these books by because you think that they're beyond you. Because as a human on this planet, they're part of your magical, occult, esoteric heritage. And so you should be able to explore them.
Okay.
Something I thought about earlier and kind of got away from the topic, but I think one thing that people kind of confuse is the idea of a grimoire versus a book of shadows.
Mm.
Can you share your thoughts on that a little bit? Because I know there are some crossover, but there's also some differences between the two, correct?
Yeah, well, if you think of grimoires as just books of magic, any kind of magic,
Mhm.
then yeah, then a book of shadows is a kind of grimoire. But books of shadows usually carry the connotation that they're a personal record of the spells, correspondences, magical work of an individual or a group of individuals. So a coven may have a book of shadows that's all their recognized magical spells that have been tried and true, and their magical practices that have worked and that they know bear results. And individuals maintain books like that too. Some people call it their magical journal. Some people call it a book of shadows. Book of Shadows is a fairly recent term. I think it was coined in the 50s. So before then they were called books of secrets, and they contained individual pieces of information that were important for esoteric practices as well as secrets of different professions like perfumery and medicine too. And you'll find this lovely combination in early books of secrets of medicine and magic and religious practices and all kinds of things combined in one text. So it's a book of shadows is often like a commonplace book of a personal collection of works that were for an individual or for a group.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's something that I personally have confused. I've looked it up in the past, but it's like something I would always confuse between. It's like, am I writing a grimoire or am I writing a book of shadows? What am I doing?
You're writing whatever you want.
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Now, a part of the book is like unlocking secrets from old texts, but grimoires can be old or new. So what's the difference, or is there a difference?
Well, we ended up calling it The Seeker's Guide to Grimoire Magic, probably because, Llewellyn thought probably The Seeker's Guide to Old Texts would probably, just the title alone would put everybody to sleep. So what I was really focusing on was historical texts in the particular book. Like my focus was on grimoires, but also a variety of other things like talismans and how to decode talismans, because that can be considered a magical text as well. Paper talismans, jewelry, Himmel briefs, letters from heaven that provide safe passage for someone in protection. All of those things, and I cannot believe my dogs are behind me right now, and I apologize.
You should see
our show is family friendly or pet friendly, so
and family friendly too. Yeah.
We call them the cryptids, but
I used to call our dogs the hellhounds. Now we're down to one hellhound, but he's still a hellhound.
Yeah, I'll be sitting here and you'll see a little black cattail come past my screen, or little ears pop out. I'm like, excuse me,
good.
It's all good.
So, and no one's grumbling at me. That's great. He probably wants out. So, what was I talking about? Oh God.
The difference between old and new grimoire.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of different.
They know you're trying to talk.
I know the family's conspiring against me. There's a lot of different older texts. They all take different shapes and forms. A lot of them can be decoded magically. And that's a thing that also fascinated me when I was younger. You go into a metaphysical shop, you find a talisman with all kinds of stuff engraved on it. What does all that mean? And most of the time, the literature that comes with it doesn't fully describe what all that means. So that's why at the end of the book, there is a full chapter that is about decoding what I have around my neck, Catherine de Medici's talisman that she was famous for having and wearing. So, that's not the only reason she was famous, of course, but it's a famed talisman, let's say. So I focused on the old because, modern grimoires are being written every day. And that's fantastic. And some of them are based off older text, and some of them are completely new and innovative. And all of it is wonderful.
They want to talk too. They have their own
Yeah,
thoughts.
they have
They
their
have their own say.
apparently you have familiars as well as a grimoire, so that's pretty
One's
cool.
named Vinegar Tom, and that's the one that's making all the
Bigger
noises.
Tom. All
And
right.
I'm going to shout for help for someone to take him away.
Okay. Well, while she's doing that, the one thing I think is fascinating about this is the runes on the cover. But Dee also talk about runes a little bit, so I'm fascinated that you include a lot of different parts to grimoires in this book.
So I tried to. It's hard because, and I think I maybe drove my editor a little bit crazy. I wanted everything, and you wanted, you can't have a comprehensive book, but I sure would have liked to have a comprehensive book that provided people with a little bit of taste of everything, a buffet approach, because a lot of times our first introduction to something is how we think all versions of that thing is. You go to a tarot reader for the first time, they do particular things, you think that's the way tarot reading is done, until you go to another one and you find out that they do it a little bit different and they have a different approach. And it's the same way with introducing someone to a type of book or a type of text. And I have a friend of mine that asked me, they were like, I read your book, what about Icelandic grimoires? And I'm like, I don't know enough about Icelandic grimoires to even write about Icelandic grimoires, so I'm sorry. I had to cut it off somewhere. But magical alphabets, I'm hugely fascinated with. Dead languages, I'm fascinated with, and so I like to include as much of that as possible.
So real quick, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to hear a quick word from our sponsor. So we'll be right back, everybody, in about 30 seconds.
A quick thank you to our supporting sponsor, Nodakian Studios. Looking for something truly one of a kind? Nodakian Studios creates high-fired ceramics that are dishwasher, microwave, and food safe. Every mug, bowl, vase, bottle, and planter is wheel-thrown and hand-decorated, making each piece unique. They also offer pottery classes for all skill levels. Whether you're touching clay for the first time or looking to expand your artistic skills, Nodakian Studios, where craftsmanship and creativity come together. Find out more at nodakianstudios.com.
So I'm still trying to figure out how to throw those mid rolls in. It's new for us. I'm like, this is going to be weird just throwing this in here, but okay, I'm gonna try.
That's why it's in our little script, Erik.
I know that, but I'm like, how do I transition from this? Because like I just want to keep going. So I mean, yeah, I think I'd have to say like, or at least I would imagine that writing a book like this is very difficult in the sense of how much you want to put in there, but potentially being limited on how much you can put in there based on page count or whatever your publisher is allowing. And here, my cat's about to walk right by here. Here goes the tail. Oh, wait. Never mind. He laid down. Instead, he's going to lay on the keyboard. So I do find that very interesting because I can imagine there's a lot more that maybe you want to share in this book that you haven't had the opportunity to do yet. So is that something that you think about, like, oh, maybe I'll do a second book, or maybe when I do a second version, I will update it with more information?
I would like to write another book at some point and cover some things. I had an experience after writing the book, spending so much time writing. I went, man, my practice has suffered because I've spent so much time here at my desk and not doing magical work. And so a month or two after I finished writing the book, I did a really, for me, challenging multi-day ritual, the longest and most intensive one that I've done, repeating the same ritual every morning, first thing in the morning for multiple days in a row. And then my experience was like, when it was done and I had this amazing experience, I was like, wow, that would be great to have been able to include in the book. But I was kind of doing it as a capstone to finish writing the book. So there's always more. And then, of course, there's also historical topics that I would have loved to have covered that didn't get to cover in the depths that I would have liked. So hopefully there will be another one eventually.
Do you
That's the ultimate goal, though, is to keep going. So
do you when it comes to historical context, do you think that's like something that's very important when it comes to a practice or learning something? Like I was thinking earlier about your necklace, and I see a lot of people wearing things that they probably have no idea what it means or what it represents. And there's been times I've asked people, like, do you know what that is? And it's like most people don't know. They just see it and they think it's cool, or they hear about it from somebody, and it's like, oh, that information's a little askew. Let me tell you the reason behind it, right? Or why it exists. How important is historical context behind a certain element, and does historical context actually change the modern interpretation of the magic?
I can talk about this through experience because
Okay.
when I was 15, this girl in my high school had this awesome necklace that looked so witchy and occulty. And I was like, I want one of those. And she said, yeah, there's a kiosk at the mall, you know. And I was like, awesome. So the next time I was at the mall, I showed it to my mom. I was like, begged. And my mom's like, okay, sure. And what it said is astrological talisman is how the little cardboard standee was labeled. And I got one for Gemini because I'm a Gemini and I wore that thing.
I'm a Gemini too.
Yes, Geminis represent. I wore that thing every day from like sophomore year of high school through part of college. And then I got excited once because I found the design. So little pamphlet said this is everything that has to do with Geminis, represents all their traits. I'm like, cool. No. It was the sigil for Belith, one of the Goetia.
Oh,
And I walked
okay.
around with the sigil for Belith around my neck for about
That's
6 years. And I write about that in the book. But one of the techniques that I write about in the book too is about repurposing, that you can charge a symbol with your own intent, interests, and impressions and change the meaning of that symbol
yeah.
to a greater lesser extent. I feel as though that became a huge I still will wear a Belith necklace as a protection charm, even if I have not worked with Belith. Sorry, Belith. Because I rebuilt that in my psyche, in my aura, with my energy. That it became different for me. It became something else. So then you find yourself at a very strange crossroads of your personal practice, respect for the original culture from which a symbol or an image came, and the idea of cultural appropriation and how to approach images and symbols respectfully. So would I teach people to wear a Belith pendant as of just a protective symbol for Geminis? Heavens no. Does it work like that for me individually, privately in my practice? And will I wear one under my shirt where people can't see it when I feel like I need a little boost of confidence or protection? Heck yes.
Yeah.
Because I've repurposed that entire image into something else.
And for context, if you don't mind me sharing who Belith is, but one of the kings of hell that were summoned as one of the 72 demons in the Lesser Key of Solomon. So for those of you who are curious, that's who it is. So it's very.
Oh, I hear the hellhounds bellowing in the background over there too. So
I would imagine it was very like, wow, when you learned what it was, and
I felt such triumph yet such embarrassment. I was like, I am too good to have done this. I should have done my homework, but it never occurred to me at the time. I was just excited to have the cool witchy looking pendant.
It's funny because I get a lot of, or I've had a lot of interactions, especially with Christians. And let me put that differently. I wouldn't say Christians as in the modern understanding of Christians, but like Christians who are within the paranormal parameters. They're into the occult. They're kind of in this circle, but everything is evil. Everything is evil, And it's like I remember I was in this one chat on Facebook, and somebody asked, like, is a symbol evil in and of itself? And I chimed in. And I said, no, it is. I personally don't think it is. I think you have to put power behind that symbol in order for it to become evil or good or whatever. And they just started swinging. Knives are out. Everybody telling me I'm not a true Christian. I'm not this. I'm not. I'm like, okay, well, and this is where like people, it comes down to, I guess, personal understanding and interpretation, belief systems, etc. But if I were to sit here and write, for example, an inverted cross. Hollywood made the inverted cross something that was supposed to be satanic. We've seen it in The Exorcism. The cross is turned upside down. But then in the Christian text, we see that the Apostle Peter was crucified upside down as a symbol of humility because he didn't want to be crucified the same way as Jesus. So we're seeing two very different, symbols here of what it represents. One being humility, the other being Satan. And it's like that's how quick and how easy it is for symbols to be misinterpreted or misunderstood. And it really comes down to the power behind it because they can both be interchangeably as good and bad. We see that with everything, really.
Yeah.
Agreed. And it becomes, interesting to look at a symbol and decide, like, think of the power that it wields just because of the associations that it has with people psychologically versus what it represents on its own.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variation there.
Yeah.
Human nature to fear what we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for magic in general, even when it comes to grimoires, and I've asked a lot of people this question that are magical practitioners, what role does intuition have in working with magic?
I think that you can. Well, first of all, I think everybody has intuition. Some people ask me, like, does everyone have? I'm like, yes. But I think that it's developed to different degrees from individual to individual. You can work magic without a lot of intuitive input. I don't know how successful you will be. You can work out and do great. But I think even in written spells that you're going to follow, it helps to listen to your intuition and to the associations that you have with what you're instructed to use. Like if something tells you to use cinnamon and you hate cinnamon because it reminds you of something bad, please don't use cinnamon. Use something else. If something makes you feel bad and you don't know why, a symbol, a shape, a part of that you have to say, well, we better figure out why it makes you feel bad before you try to use it to wield power, because it will weaken your ability. And so I think that intuition plays a huge role, but people have to stop and not only listen to their intuition, but also act on it and make adjustments as necessary, because the more they are psychologically and spiritually in line with whatever the magical work is, the more successful it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But now, is there a difference between adapting a practice and simply stripping it from its meaning?
I think so. I mean, you can get to the point where a spell or a ritual has been changed so much that it, is barely recognizable, and you've kind of lost the plot, and that could be good and it can be bad. If you're relying on it adhering at least in part to its original intent, then that can be a difficult, if you were using it to riff off of to create something wholly new, then that's amazing. It depends on what your intent is and what you hope. You could just, if you like a structure of a ritual, you can strip all the content out and just use that outline or structure in order to build something new and modern for yourself. You're still being inspired by older works, historical works, but you're really taking it in a completely different direction. And it gets weirder and weirder and more abstract as you go.
Now, you talk about talismans in the book, and you've even mentioned it here. What makes talismans such a powerful part of grimoire magic?
Well, I think so many focus on what we consider talisman, the pentacles of the lesser key or the greater key, for example, and the symbols that are used with the Goetia in the lesser key. And it was a fascinating part of finding actual scans of these manuscripts to see these drawings for me when I was younger, and it's the practical piece in a lot of cases. It's you do all this work to contact these entities, to purify yourself, to prepare yourself, and then you can contact these entities, and then you can use these talismans, designs, seals, sigils to accomplish what it is you want to accomplish, whether that is a union with the Godhead, or whether that is finding treasure, or whether that is getting in the pants of the person that you are most attracted to. There's all kinds of different talismans out there that can be used. And you know, and it goes to, you know, they're portable. You can wear them, you can carry that piece of magic with you for whatever purposes you have.
Now Eric's got a talisman that he absolutely loves, which is I believe, wolf pendant, and it's made out of obsidian,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, black obsidian. Yeah.
Is there one that you particularly enjoy wearing more than others?
Well, there's this one, which I already brought up. Catherine de Medici's talisman. It's fascinated me probably for 30 years. And I've spent lots of time investigating the different symbols on it and what they mean. And I have such a love for this thing because of its sheer complexity and the amount of imagery on it. And some of the imagery comes from some of the oldest grimoires. The main figures on both sides of the talisman come from the Picatrix, which is one of the granddaddy grimoires that have been, you know, we have evidence of it going back, you know, I think to the 13th century. And I love it for its complexity, and I love it because nobody knows exactly what everything on it means. And to me, that means that the mystery is alive, the intrigue is there, and there's different ways that you can explore it, both academically and historically and magically, to find out more about it. So I love an unsolved mystery.
Okay.
Well, now for people who actually see like an old talisman or a new one for that matter and have no idea what they're looking at, where should they really begin their search on trying to figure out what it is and how to use it?
The first thing is to get organized. The thing I recommend to folks is to write down all the different elements or redraw all the different elements and number them. And then go through and start to identify what you can, if you can. If there's a phrase on it that is in a language you understand or that you can translate, and machine translations really improved these days, so you can, you know, use different translation software. And then you start, the hard part is paging through the old texts and trying to, well, you learn about the history, the background of the talisman if you possibly can, so that you can start looking into older magical texts from that area and that time period, so that you can start picking out what the individual little weird squiggly shapes on the talisman means, and start looking up what they mean individually and potentially what they mean in conjunction with each other. And it's not a fast process. It's one you can pick up and work on and then leave and then come back years later and work on some more. And when I was writing about this Catherine de Medici's talisman, I found out new things that I got to include in the book that I hadn't noticed about the talisman before. So, you know, it's none of this is fast, but it's edifying and satisfying to do.
Well, and I'll argue that, like, it's very important to strip down the elements of it and figure out what each one mean individually before figuring out what they all mean together. Especially in the sense, like, when we think about modern times and modern tech, you can take a picture of a talisman or anything and do a Google search or ask Gemini, and it'll give you a list of information of all this stuff. But then when you look at the links that information is derived from, you start to realize that a lot of that information is either false or it's mistaken, misidentified, things are just not correct. And though I think it could be used as a good starting point. But I think for a lot of people, myself included, because I fail at it, I do it all the time, more than I like to admit. You know, I'll look at something and I'll take a picture and send it. And it's like, oh, this is what it means. And it's like, you should be careful because that is not entirely accurate. Like these computer systems, they're fast on finding information, but whether or not that information is accurate is still way up in the air.
It's pulling information from all over the internet. So yeah.
And some of it is from the biggest hits that it gets.
Right.
And and some of it is from, you know, there are lots of descriptions of what this talisman is on sites that sell it because there's this very prepackaged description of what's on the talisman that's when it's sold, that color some of your search results. And so sometimes you can get a clue or a hint from a site where that's selling the item, but it's not always completely accurate. And so you have to use caution and, compare with other texts and other information that you find. But like I found something on this talisman by accident on, I think it's Occultopedia, because I was looking up something else. And then I found this weird little squiggle that I had never been able to interpret before that led me to the book, the Omegia, which is an English text, very, very old grimoire and collection of magical information. And I was able to find out more about this talisman through that little fortuitous, accidental recognition of something.
Wow. Now, for beginners that want to start using either just becoming a magical practitioner themselves or delving into grimoire magic, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
The piece of advice that I would give is go slow. No, nobody's timing you. This is not a competition or a race. And the other important piece of advice I would give is, in the realm of grimoires or older texts, find something that absolutely fascinates you that you just can't get out of your head. Because if you do, then you will joyfully go to the work of figuring it out, decoding it as best you can, working out what the different significances of what's written or drawn in it are. But if you don't have that fascination, that love, that's what really draws you into study of an older text is an inner drive that drives your magical interest, your spiritual interests, to do that decoding work. And it doesn't have to be something big. It can be one image in one text or one passage in one text that you find and that fills you with intrigue. And that's what you should chase. That's what you should study.
Yeah, and I find that that's the one thing that constantly drives me in everything that we do for this podcast too. It's like we wouldn't be doing the podcast if we didn't have interest in it, right?
Or questions.
And we constantly study it. And one thing that I've always found fascinating is the idea of spirit animals. And I started with the wolf as the primary because I've grown up just with a love of wolves. Everything about wolves has just been so fascinating to me. The way they work together, the way they hunt, the way they react, the way they live and love, and so on and so forth. There's so much more extravagant than what I think a lot of people think. They think, oh, wolf, bad, it kills things, and and it's like there's so much that we can learn from not just wolves, but from animals in general. I remember the first time I ever saw an owl in real life, outside the zoo. Out in the wild.
I would call that real life versus.
Okay, that's fair. But it's like I was living in Atlanta, and I just kept hearing it, do its call. I think it was hooting, but I could not find it anywhere. It was somewhere in the tree above me. Didn't know where it was. It became a little dark, so I went inside, and it was dusk. And we don't. I don't know about you guys, but dusk is very hard to see some things because it's just shadows. And all of a sudden, I look outside, and there's this giant owl just sitting in the grass, watching me. But I couldn't make out any features. I just knew it was an owl. I was like, well, that's very mysterious. And it's
Wow.
I wouldn't say haunted, but it's been something on my mind for the last 6 years now. It's like it has not left. There's always this thing about owls that has been fascinating. Why did that owl appear when it did? And why was it so mysterious? What is it trying to tell me? And that's something I always find interesting, especially. Is when you do have interest, whatever that is, you are naturally going to gravitate towards that thing, and you learn about it and learn about it and learn about it. And it's typically the case that interest is never satisfied. You always want to know more.
You're always hungry for more. And then that hunger carries you over the frustrating parts and the rough patches where you're not getting the information you want.
Right.
I said it earlier. We keep delving deeper into everything
Yes.
paranormal when we get into it. And you talking about that, Erik, as of recently, I've really been thinking that mine is a crow, just because I've always been fascinated with crows and ravens. Now, we are getting kind of close to the end here, but I wanted to ask you, for our listeners tonight and those that read the book, what is one thing, and we kind of touched on it earlier, what is one thing that you hope people take from the Seeker's Guide to Grimoire Magic?
That the bounty and abundance of magical secrets that are encoded in grimoires that have been penned throughout the centuries and around the world are part of our cultural and magical heritage, and that it's ripe for the exploration. And it's especially today with so many digitized libraries out there and so many specialized libraries around the world that contain the actual texts themselves, that if you have an interest, it doesn't matter. I'm a dropout. You don't have to be an academic. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to be somebody that loves the topic. Go out there and explore.
That's good. So what do we got here? We got just a couple minutes. So we do want to give you the opportunity then to kind of tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your book, and anything else you want to share. The mic is all yours. Feel free to share whatever you want.
Oh my God, I'm terrible at this. Well, you can find me on TikTok as Liminal Reader, where I talk about this stuff and I talk about tarot reading and stuff like that. That's what the book looks like. I have mine over there. I told you I'm terrible at this stuff. If you're in the Atlanta, Georgia area, I'm going to be at Mystic South in July. I help organize the divination room there, but I'm also giving a workshop on creating work on curse tablets and how to use them in modern practices, called Curse Your Heart to Heal It. And it's an amazing event that's really fun. And I think that's about it. I have a store on Etsy called Black Candle Cottage that sells Italian-American candles, magical candles. But mostly I'm just forever who's listening out there. It's a big magical wide world out there. If my stuff doesn't appeal to you, there's other things that'll appeal to you. Go out and explore the magical possibilities in the world.
Well, and we haven't even touched on half of what we wanted to ask you, so we'll have to have you back. If it's not for Grimoire Magic, just to talk paranormal, because we loved talking to you before the show about it all. So, Dee, thank you for being on ParaTruth Reborn.
Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, make sure you check out Dee Norman's book, Seeker's Guide to Grimoire Magic. If you're watching YouTube, there it is right there. Awesome guest, and I've loved looking through this book.
Yeah, it's always fascinating. Like, I'm always trying to find new books about grimoires, and I've talked to you. This was why we did a show on it ourselves. What, a year or so ago, something like that. It's been a while.
Yeah,
but there was a time where I was just like so fascinated. And I was going through all this stuff. I was talking to you about it. I'm like, we should just do a show because of all the stuff you're like looking into. I was like, it's a good idea. But this was much more informative. Clearly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
To have someone who's a professional on to tell us what it's all about.
Well, I mean, in anything we talk about without a guest, I would rather have a guest to come on to at least feed into what we're coming across on the internet.
100%. All right, so I'm going to be, for those of you watching, I'm looking down because I have to use my phone for notes this entire episode because this computer is just jacked up. But we asked our ParaTruther community group, what part of Grimoire Magic are you most curious about? Now, 50% said ancient spells and rituals, and 50% said spirits and magical beings. This is the second time we've had a 50-50 split, which is very interesting, to say the least.
I mean, there were two other answers that got 0%. So yes, like these two particular answers, why, for sure.
Yeah. So if you're listening live on United Public Radio Network, we, of course, appreciate you being here with us tonight. But here's the thing. ParaTruth doesn't end when the live show ends. If you want more conversations like this, more clips, more behind-the-scenes content, and a chance to submit questions for future guests, follow ParaTruth Reborn directly on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and your favorite podcast platform. And UPRN brings us together live every Tuesday night. So our ParaTruth channels keep the community alive all week long. All you have to do is search ParaTruth Reborn, subscribe, and become part of the ParaTruth community. So as you said at the beginning of the show, This was a live episode on 107.7 FM New Orleans, 105.3 FM the Gulf Coast, and the United Public Radio Network. So you'll find us same time, same channel, right here next week. We'll see you then.